You want your happiest, healthiest, strongest plants possible. One of the key inputs to making that plant happy, healthy, and strong are nutrients. Whether it's organic or synthetic, we need to make sure that we're measuring them right. I'm going to go through and show you 4 different ways to measure nutrients and how important it can be to make sure that we're using the right amount. So the 4 ways that we're going to discuss measuring are eyeballing it. A pinch will do you, just like Grandma says. Using a measuring spoon. Measuring by weight. And then finally, we're going to actually use a parts per million meter to measure how many dissolved solids are in there exactly. Stay to the end to find out which one of these methods works out the best. The nutrient that we're mixing up today to do this little experiment is Maxi Grow from General Hydroponics. Here is a feeding chart for Maxi Grow and Maxi Bloom. If you notice, General Hydroponics has several other products listed that you can potentially add. Bare bones minimum, we want to use our base nutrients, the Maxi Grow for veg, the Maxi Bloom for flower. The reason that I'm mentioning all of these extraneous things, because they will add to the total dissolved solids or the parts per million of the solution. So if we look here, in early veg, they're talking about a total parts per million between 900 and 1100. For this particular experiment, we're going to use our ppm meter to achieve 1,000 parts per million. That's what our goal is. So the first method that we're going to try is by eyeballing it. You know how Grandma said a couple pinches is worth about a teaspoon? Well, here we go. So we're going to go 1/4 teaspoon into each one of these volumes of water. They're all equal, so that way when we want to actually see what the total dissolved solids are in each of them, we're comparing apples to apples. So now we're going to get ourselves 1/4 teaspoon, which is going to be about half a pinch. So here we go. There you go, Grandma. There's about a half a pinch. So we're going to let that dissolve, stir that up, come back and test the EC. The next method that we're going to try is with an actual measuring spoon. So by volume, we're going to shake off and get ourselves, so here we're just kind of getting a quote-unquote level teaspoon, or in this case a 1/4 teaspoon. And we're going to just add that right in there. Make sure that we get every little bit in there. So if you notice, there was some nutrients sitting kind of around it too. Now that might have gotten in there, that might not have gotten in there. That could cause a problem down the road. The third method we're going to look at is using an actual digital scale. A good rule of thumb is 5 grams equals approximately 1 teaspoon. So if we're doing 1/4 teaspoon, that means we need approximately 1.25 grams of nutrients. So now we've got our little measuring device. We're going to take the scooper that came with our Maxi Grow. We've got to tear out the weight from our scale. So now we're back down to 0. So we need 1.25 grams. Whoop, 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 whoop. So now we've got to take a little bit out to get back to that 1 point. All right. So this digital scale does not have 2 decimal points of accuracy. So we're going to have to guesstimate it at 1.3. Now we're going to take that, add that to our water volume. Now we're going to stir up each one of the nutrient solutions that we've whipped up just to make sure that everything is dissolved in there. Whatever we use, make sure that it is clean. So right now I'm just using a a plastic spoon. We still see some dissolved solids floating around in there. We want to make sure that all of that gets stirred up. One's completely mixed up. We're going to go to the second one where we use the volume, or the measuring spoon is what normal people would call it. You might be tempted to use the same measuring spoon that you scaled out your nutrients to actually mix up the solution. Remember when we spoke about the little bit of nutrients that were stuck to the outside of this? That could affect the amount of nutrients that you get, especially when we're working with smaller volumes. A bigger volume, if we were mixing up a 55-gallon nutrient reservoir, that little bit of dust from the nutrients wouldn't matter at all. In smaller volumes, it could have a dramatic effect on the nutrient level. I can't stress that enough. Small volumes, it will affect it. So we're going to use our handy dandy clean mixing spoon. And again, we're just trying to make sure that all of the dissolved solids get mixed up really well, which honestly, they were almost dissolved before I even started mixing it up. But just make sure. Definitely looking pretty good on that front. We're gonna clean our spoon off so there's no cross-contamination. Now we're going to go stir up the third method of measuring, being by weight. Looks like we've got a pretty good mix. So now we're going to go through and test each one's electrical conductivity, or EC. The particular meter that we're using today goes by parts per million, or ppm. So we're going to stick it in the first guy. Our parts per million come out to be 360. Oh, we're still. Well, it looks like we're going to stay steady at 300. Oh, nope, 372. All right, so it went up and it went down. Now we can feel pretty comfortable with that 365 to 367, 370 world. So now let's go test the next solution. We rinse this off so there's no cross-contamination. This actually might be too small a volume. Now that we've got the second one stirred up, we're going to rinse off our spoon real quick so we don't get any more cross-contamination or any cross-contamination. We're going to stir up the one that was measured by weight. Just got to make sure that everything is dissolved, so that way we're comparing apples to apples. We started off with all of the same water source. So now we just got to make sure that everything actually gets dissolved. We're getting close, guys. Still got a couple in there. This water was pretty cold, so it's a little bit harder to dissolve dry nutrients in. A little trick is to have lukewarm water versus very cold water. The other thing with using very cold water is your plants don't want it. They want water that's going to be in the low 60s to low 70s. They don't want cold, cold water. You don't want to give them 50-degree water. It's going to shock them. We don't want to shock our plants. So it looks like pretty much got everything dissolved. We're gonna clean off our spoon. We're gonna take our electrical conductivity meter reading. So in the middle one that was done by volume, 870 parts per million. That's almost double, or actually more than double, what we had from when we used Grandma's old a pinch'll do ya method. So now let's rinse out our meter to keep any cross-contamination. Now for the one done by weight. So this particular meter only has 3 digits in it. So to read 1,000, if you can see there, that little blinking times 10. So this particular meter means that this is 100 times 10, or 1,000 parts per million. So Grandma's method was about 380-ish. Method by volume measurement was about 870-ish. Method done by weight was 1,000 parts per million. And now the final method we're going to use is actually using the EC meter to get the value that we want. There are several ways to measure out your nutrients. There's the good old by your eyeball, like Grandma would do. There's using a measuring spoon, or by volume. You can use a scale by weight, or we can use an EC meter. I feel that the best way to do it is using the EC meter, so that way we know exactly how many dissolved solids the plant is actually getting. Have yourself a healthy and happy, strong plant from beginning to end.